In terms of the whole black people killing black people thing, I just want to throw this in. Like, I heard this theory that not the main reason, but a reason why this whole like black on black crime, especially with black men, is a thing, is because black men a lot of them in those areas grew up without fathers, and it causes them to have subconscious hate for black men.
Which is the root.
That's something that I heard. I don't know how deep it goes. I just saw like the surface level statement, but it's something.
It all comes down to the root.
That's not exactly the root.
What I believe is the root.
That's not exactly the root, because if you look at it, what are the reasons why their fathers aren't there?
Well, it doesn't, like, either way, all this stuff happened, but at the end of the day, there needs to be something done in the communities.
Okay, so here's my question. If something needs to be done for the communities, what do you guys, this is a loaded question and it could be very big. What do you guys think should be the next steps on us rebuilding our communities?
Okay.
Putting more funding into our communities, like,
I would say very specific education.
Yes,
education.
exactly.
That's the only thing I can think of right now.
Exactly.
No, that's honestly one of the biggest things. Education. There's a lot of damage done, especially with the welfare and whatever else they did. That's the thing. Systematic racism played a part in it. In the communities, right? Now it's damaged. Now we need to fix it, right? But in order the communities is still the root of the problem, I think.
I was going to get at the fact that the community got that way somehow.
It doesn't matter how.
It does matter how it got that way, because if you don't know how it got that way, if you don't know what the problem is, you can't fix it.
Yeah.
I think we know what the problem is.
What's the problem?
What's the problem?
No, you said you know it. Go ahead.
I think
we know what the problem is.
You're going to say the root. So
I
need to hear your
root.
Your root.
All right. Okay. As Deborah has mentioned before, right? There has been times in the past where we have tried to come out of the current state that we're in those communities. And it has been neglected, it has been rejected, it has been pushed down, right? In terms of, let's receive more funding for this. We need more healthcare for that. We need this kind of support. We need that kind of support. And like you said, co-op, right? Or co-optation.
Yeah.
It turns into something else, right? While all of that is happening, there are outside factors still making the community worse as we go along. There's inside factors, there are outside factors, and we're not getting support, right? So we're left here to fend against ourselves and fend against external forces, right? The way that, if we really want to talk about how these communities got that way, obviously we're going to go back to slavery. We're going to go to the Jim Crow laws after slavery. We're going to go to the fact that there was no opportunity in between slavery till now that black people as a whole had a time to generate the wealth for themselves, except for that Tulsa, Oklahoma,
or even just heal.
Right?
Does anyone right now ever recall mental health assistance to slaves? Anybody remember sending in the therapist after I sold off your son, daughter, raped folks? At any point? Never. Second question. After slavery was officially over, now you're free. Anybody remember any therapy then? We know it's been rough, it's been deep for you, it's been difficult. We're going to do a little group therapy. Anybody remember that? That would be no. Number 3, after slavery officially ended, both in the States, in the Caribbean, the British ended, do you remember whether or not trauma continued? Did the trauma continue for people of African descent? I need to know. Okay, so now let's do the math. Hundreds of years of trauma, no treatment. Freed, more trauma, no treatment. What do you do the math? Do you think there may be residual impacts of that trauma? Of course there is. It didn't end, friends, and it hasn't ended yet.
We're talking about, I mean, look at how people are making posts right now talking about that we need to stop seeing black people dying on the internet, that it's traumatizing. That's just seeing it on the internet and it's traumatizing. Imagine going through 230 years of slavery, an extra 100 plus years of Jim Crow, on how many years of the segregation and the mass imprisonment, forced sterilization, all of these things that were taking place at the same time, not allowing you to get the time to get educated. Because during the Jim Crow era, it was still almost illegal in some parts to get an education right after slavery. Right. So you're uneducated, you can't work, you can't earn an income for yourselves, and you're 300 years behind everyone else. Yet we still managed to pull ourselves to a point that's somewhat acceptable. And we now started to build our communities. We had that Tulsa, Oklahoma. We had Black Wall Street.
And Oklahoma is a unique space in terms of the number of African-American towns that were established. Some suggest upwards of 50 African-American towns between 1924 and 1928. Reverend S.S. Jones was going around documenting this sort of self-determined, vibrant African-American communities. You see the African-American educators, doctors, lawyers, landowners, oil barons, and I think that's what's so remarkable about this footage. To think that individuals, how many years out of slavery, are now owning oil wells that are producing 2,000 barrels a day. Is that not the ultimate American dream? Is that not the ultimate American story? It flies in the face of what I think some people consider part of African American history and culture. And I think that that was one of the things that Oklahoma and what S.S. Jones is really kind of showing, is that African American history and culture is not a monolith. And in a way, it became kind of like a marketing tool to encourage individuals to migrate, to move there, that this is a place where you can live, you can thrive, and peacefully reside. There were still palpable racial tensions. There are lynchings, there's Jim Crow, segregation, there's all of these things, and you still have an African-American community, or many communities, that really speak to the fortitude and resilience of Black people in this country.
Right? What took place during those time periods when we had the Black Wall Street was people were getting lynched for the smallest thing. You look at a white woman the wrong way and you're getting hung by a mob, right? And there was an unfortunate case where a Black man was in an elevator with this white woman. The elevator shook and the man fell over onto her. She screamed, and he knew the fact that she screamed, if he didn't leave that scene, darkness. Like, somebody unfortunately saw him leaving the elevator and saw the woman and assumed whatever they're going to assume. Within that same day, a mob of like 2,000 to 3,000 people were there all to kill this man. They didn't wait to demand justice. People knew that she actually hadn't been raped because she came out and said it, but it didn't matter because it was an emotional thing. Almost like the contrast of the Black Lives Matter movement now, right? However, when that happened, when that took place, the places were burned down, the whole city and community was burned down. How many hundreds of people were killed? And did the government do anything to support? No. What kind of insurance was there? Nothing. You start again. And on top of that, you can't even start again in that community because they don't want to see you there. So you move out to a different place, start from absolutely nothing, and you're trying to build a community from scratch again. And Black Wall Street wasn't the only one. There was more than one Black Wall Street. You had situations where...
Even just Africville in Nova Scotia.
Yeah, we would build communities, and there were certain people that have said that we would build a community, we would make it successful, and then the government will come in and say, we're trying to set up a highway project right here, so we need you guys to move.
And it's not just us they do it to. They do it to indigenous people too. So we should definitely recognize that fact.
100%. But these are part of the little things that start to pile up on themselves, right? You're now in a situation, 1900s, people are driving cars, people are doing things. You can't get a job. You're uneducated. And generally, the people you would be going to get a job don't like you, right? What are you left to do? You still have to feed yourself. You still have to put food on the table. You now start looking for ulterior ways to make money, right? Now, you're in a situation where you're looking for ulterior ways to make money. And a lot of the things that we would have done now became illegal to do. In certain cases, during the whole Nixon time period and the crack epidemic that took place, we would sell crack of whatever amount it was to sustain ourselves and to sustain our families. If we were caught, we would go to jail for a longer time period than if a white individual was caught with the same amount of drugs.
In 1986, Congress passed a sprawling criminal justice bill, a central feature of which was a mandatory sentencing disparity punishing crack violations much more harshly than those for powder cocaine.
You could have 500 grams of powder and still get probation. 5 grams of crack, you get 5 years mandatory minimum.
That difference has had catastrophically racially disparate effects.
80% of the crack defendants were African American.
These effects have prompted critics to decry excessive crack minimums as purely the products of Reagan-era white supremacy. But that narrative is ever so slightly complicated by this.
You should not allow people to be able to distribute this poison without fear.
Congressman Rangel, along with much of the black political leadership, was a key advocate for erecting these laws in the first place.
They should be caged like wild animals because that's what they are. We are not going to be put back into slavery by our own people.
This minimum sentencing regime has proven to be a grotesque case study in unintended consequences. There are thousands of stories just like this.
Weldon Angelos was a 22-year-old aspiring music producer and father of 2 young boys.
Someone gets snapped up on a low-level, non-violent drug offense.
His crime? Carrying a gun and selling 24 ounces of pot.
The presiding judge is forced to apply a devastating arithmetic in which minor violations exponentially add up to a gigantic prison term.
Weldon Angelos was sent to prison for 55 years.
I think that wasn't the right thing to do, and the system forced me to do it.
A 55-year sentence is not going to do anything more than a 5 or 10-year sentence would have done, except destroy my entire life.
I think an aspect of the root of the problem, quote unquote, is the way the crack epidemic played out. Because if you look at it, black people were selling crack to their own neighborhoods.
That's what I was just about to say. Why does it matter when the middle class whites start dying from it? That's when it becomes a problem. When black people have been dying from it. Exactly. For a long time, black people had been dying from it. It was never a problem.
They didn't care.
Yeah, I think in selling it to their own neighborhoods, because if you look at a lot of places like Harlem got hit by it, right?
Yeah.
It was good. Like, it was a good middle class neighborhood. Next thing you know, like, it turns into what we know Harlem as today. Or at least, I don't know if it's the same today as it was in the 80s, but yeah, so imagine all the black men, or at least a lot of them, are locked up.
Mass incarceration.
Women,
because again, 3-strike rule too.
Yeah. Like, imagine all the black men are gone. There's a lower pool of men to choose.
My name is Earlonne Woods. The first time I was arrested as an adult, I was sentenced to 31 years to life under California 3 strikes law for attempted second-degree robbery. I served 21 years before my sentence was commuted by Governor Brown. In the last decade, numerous 3-strike cases have been overturned out of recognition of their injustice. The impact of excessive sentencing within our criminal justice system has morphed into a dehumanizing, oppressive business-as-usual model. With all that said, it has been almost 25 years and this law is still on the books. You have people like Caesar McDowell, who has been incarcerated for 20 years and serving 25 to life for a verbal argument with his spouse. Or for Don Figures, who has served 23 years of a 210-year to life sentence for robbing McDonald's. And you have countless others that's just stuck and incapacitated.
It's just, I think that moment kind of turned the black household upside down. Like, kids have no father.
Yeah, then their welfare on top of that. Like, they're giving incentives, whatever it's called.
I was just about to say that. Like, honestly, no time was really ever good for us in America. But I would say the best times could be, or the times where we were our strongest, could be when we had nobody to rely on. And that was probably during segregation and stuff like that. Because think of it, if they're not going to hire you or whatever, you have to create your own money, you create your own businesses, you create your own communities, because you're not even allowed in the restaurants, X, Y, and Z, other types of businesses that they have made. So what do? You have to create your own, And the family structure was a thing too, because again, you had nobody to rely on but other black people. So as a result, black family structures are stronger, and then the community kind of creates itself in a sense. So that's when it was at its strongest. But now through other services like welfare and like women depending on that, and like again the prison system taking away the men, and just a lot of other things, and even just the public education system, let's be real about that, that has caused the breaking and the dismantling of the Black family.